Hi, Selena Woodward here from Teach Technologies. This video cast is about how I use my interactive whiteboard in my English teaching. I'm a secondary English teacher, and this particular lesson is focused on looking for Alibrandi, an Australian novel typically taught to Year 9s. The purpose of the video is not only to give you an insight into how I teach, but really to think about how an interactive whiteboard might be used in an English lesson to enhance teaching and learning. So I'm going to basically go through my lesson as a rationale and explain some of the decisions that I've made and what it might look like in a classroom. Page 7 of this resource actually contains my lesson plan. Please excuse all the arrows. This is sort of indicative of the way in which I deliver my lessons. I start by connecting students with an idea, the big picture of the lesson. Then I activate their thinking, and then I ask them to demonstrate what they've learned from that. So you can see that there's a lot of activation and demonstration throughout, leading down to a consolidation where students pull all of that together to produce one thing, which would then be assessed against the lesson objectives. On the first page, I have my lesson objectives. In this particular instance, I've got a wide range of abilities, so I've gone with Bloom's taxonomy. So words such as recall, hear, comment, evaluate, are all words taken from Bloom's taxonomy. Obviously, when we start with all, we're looking at lower level thinking skills, and then we're actually getting harder and harder as we go down to some with the word evaluate. Now, I always explain this to my students. It's up to them where they want to aim. The whole lesson is actually aimed at trying to get them here, regardless of their ability. And I'm using the whiteboard and the discussion that it causes and creates to support students who would find that really difficult and try and push them there. I also have on my first screen a homework. I always place my homework on the first screen, and my students are very used to recording that homework at the beginning of the lesson. Often, not so much in this case, but often they won't understand the homework task until they get to the end of the lesson, and they're very used to that. And that demonstrates to them that they have learned something, because if they don't understand what the homework task is at the beginning, when they get to the end of the lesson, if they do, then they must have acquired knowledge. So that's quite an interesting way of measuring progress throughout the lesson. I'm also giving them advice about how much reading needs to be done every week, because I'm expecting this novel to be read in its complete form. So that's what's going on here. This is mostly a teacher-led page with discussion, explanation. Okay, the next page, page 2, literally has a picture of a guy holding a recipe book, which I've crudely written story openings on. At the top, you'll notice that I've placed the higher order thinking skill objective, evaluate the effectiveness, because that, as I said, is where I'd like everybody to aim. Shoot for the stars and you may land on the moon. That's my theory. So we're going to shoot for the stars. Some could evaluate. And the way this works in my lesson plan, you'll see that I've told them that I want the pupils to come up and write down their thoughts. I'm going to use the timer widget, and I'm going to give it about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that's all they need, to think about what are the key ingredients for a good story opening. Now, if you have students who struggle to do that, or this is very new to them, the idea of coming up and talking is new to them, I would advise that perhaps you use think, pair, share first. So you ask your students to think about the answer for a minute. You give them a minute to tell the person next to them what they're thinking and have a little discussion. Then you turn the timer on. So in total, we're looking at maybe 4.5 minutes for this task. But in this case, I'm just going to use the board to do something that I call a timed gather, to just open ideas, to connect with what it is that we're asking to do. And I do not want to take a lot of time over this. So pace-wise, I'm using the timer, which you may have seen flashing back and forth down here in the corner. That's found over here in the widgets menu in Next Generation. If I just type in timer down the bottom here, it'll place it over the middle of the page and load it. I can hit this cog and set how long I want it to be, and then once I've set that, all I have to do is I usually get my students to drag it, and they literally click the top like you would normally with an ordinary timer, and it will time them, and it will make a horrendous noise and flash up a message at the end to say time's up. So it's just to help you keep the pace of your lesson there and make sure that this discussion doesn't take up too much time. It literally is about connecting with the ideas. Once we've thought about the kind of things that we want to find in the opening, it's when we start coming to the text. So on my lesson, I've got read the first 2 paragraphs and predict what is happening to this narrator. I'm going to invite them up, and I'm going to ask them to use the highlighter and pen tool to demonstrate to me how they're getting that inference or finding or creating that deduction. What's the words, what are the language choices that you are pulling out that are inferring those meanings. Now you'll notice at the top that I've chosen to ask the teacher or the student, up to you how you want to manage that, to go view modes and curtain reveal. Personally, I probably would have done that the page before. I'd go to my E button, go to view modes and go to curtain reveal to turn that on. Now if I move to my next page, you can tell I'm on the next page because it's lit up here in the panel at the side, but I can't see it. And I can now pull this blind down and slowly reveal parts at a time. Now the reason that I'm doing that is because I want students to focus on what is happening. I don't want them to have the big picture. So first of all, panic was my first reaction to the multiple choice options that lay on my desk. I would ask my students, where is this person? What are they doing? And how do you know where they are? Their reaction usually is, they're at school, they're doing an exam. How do you know they're at school? Well, they'll come up and highlight the word desk. Okay, what makes you think it's an exam? Multiple choice. How do you know this is school? And interestingly, I'm not sure what this says about the way they feel about school, the word panic is usually the word. And they'd start to explain to me that this is obviously a student who's very stressed about a test in a school. So I'm actually asking them and teaching them to pull out the evidence straight away to support their inferences and deductions. Okay, now we keep reading down and we start to come up with more evidence. We start to talk about this character. What kind of character is this character? What kind of person are they? They'll tell you she's conscientious, she's very keen to do well at school, etc. As you go down, you'll see words like devastating my sense of being, and then which obviously implies that this is very important to her, that she takes school very seriously if we're going to continue with this inference. Already the students in my class with the key evaluation skills can be pushed a little bit further, because I can link this back to characterization if I need to, if I want to push this further, and I can ask them to explain to me which word choices are creating the character, how are they getting that evidence, you know, how is that effective as an opening, etc. Okay, once we've looked at that, we can pull the curtain reveal all the way down to the bottom and go on to the next slide, slide 3. I actually used Google because Google Books contains most novels that we study, and then I've used the capture tool in Windows 7 to take a screenshot. Now with the page before, I would have given them a copy of that, and I would have asked them to annotate with us together so that I've got evidence in their text, in their book, of the work that we've done, and also so they can refer to that at the end. On the next page, obviously we start to learn that it's not a quiz, it's not a test. It is a quiz, but it's in a magazine. This character isn't actually that bothered about what's going on, and she's actually quite cheeky to her teachers. So again, we can use the highlighter tool to find words and pull out words if we're pushing down the characterization route. That wasn't the main objective of this particular part of the lesson, but we could do if we wanted to continue to challenge. Either that, or we keep referring back to our openings, the things that we have, the ingredients, and we'll keep discussing what we've got. And in fact, next thing that I have on my lesson plan is to revisit these annotations and look at the time together activity and ask them if they can add anything to this writing that they have here, or that they will have here. Is there anything they want to take away that they've changed their mind about, has nothing to do with openings? As their learning develops, as their understanding develops, I want them to make the decision that that's not right, that's better. I want us to come back and reflect on what we've learned. This is almost like a mini plenary at this point, and to take things off and add things in. Once we've done that, I'm going to ask them to tell me what's good. So what is good about this opening? Let's go back to the objectives. And you can see that I'm actually using this bar to navigate back and forth throughout my entire resource to come back to the objectives. Come back to these and explain that we need to recall the ingredients. Ask them, who could tell me what are the ingredients of an effective opening? Everyone in your room should be able to do that because they've been doing this process. You've covered that. That will build a bit of confidence. Can anyone tell me anything about structural choices? The idea of what order things are coming in. Okay? So most of your students should be able to do that because, again, we've spent a lot of time together talking about these things. And then again, evaluation. Now, in order to focus and to support students with this higher level thinking skill, we're going to spend a little bit more time on this. So you'll note in my lesson plan that I ask you to pick one student who will become scribe. This student can then flick between page 5, which is the spare notes page, and page 3 and 2 and 1 if necessary, to have a look at what they believe to be effective. So we're going to actually have a conversation. The student in charge who is interacting with the board is going to be the person who writes on the board any words they hear which are review or evaluative words. We're going to write anything that's evaluative that they consider to be evaluative on this board and create a vocabulary list that will support us when we complete that third level objective. Now, I would choose carefully who it was that I'd invite up. I would probably choose someone who I feel is probably aiming for that middle objective but could do with a bit of pushing. And I would do that because this activity will support them and it will push them, develop them, give them a bit of confidence because they're the one who's the expert, they're the one who is writing up to give it a go. So once we've finished that and we've got those words, we can obviously discuss how those words might be used for evaluating. All right, and then we've got our challenge. Now our challenge comes in our consolidate phase in our lesson plan, and I'm asking them this question. Discuss the opening of Looking for Alibrandi. In fact, it's not even a question, it's a statement. I'm ordering them to discuss what it is that they have learned. And it's an incredibly open question or open statement on purpose because I want to see lots of different things happening. And you'll notice now that the objectives are at the bottom of the page again, but they're color-coded. And they're color-coded to indicate those levels. So people will be aiming for blue, for orange, or for purple. Everyone should be aiming for purple. We've already demonstrated we can do blue. I just need you to write it down, and we know how that can be an issue for some students. At this point, you may feel that's all you need, a title and a reminder of what we're doing based on the conversation. There may, however, be some students who need a little more scaffolding than that. And I've actually got that scaffolding on this page, but I've chosen to leave it hidden purely because I want to make that decision at the end of my lesson. I want to decide whether we need that. I don't want to provide that in case and then have it there and not have the opportunity to keep that challenge level up. So instead, if I use my play mode, you'll see a cursor, and the crosshair means there's something there. So if I click there, what makes a good opening? Well, that obviously, if we answer that question, will help us to meet that blue objective, and so on. Now, I would encourage my students to come out of their seats, to come up here and to use the board. If they need a clue, they can come and click. You know, it may be that I want to change this, so I've got blue, orange, purple indicators on the side so they know where the clues are and they can come and have a look and hide it again. It may be that I decide that we need all of those things anyway, and I bring them up and discuss them. I would also be encouraging my students to come up and have a look at what's on the board here, even though, of course, they will have recorded some of these things in their book for evidence. But the board belongs to my students. I have spent time talking during this phase. They have spent time writing all over this. They've spent time writing all over this page. They've spent time talking and writing all over this page. This page just is for me again, but for me to set up an activity, but again they've got the opportunity to come up and get extra support by the show and hide if they wish. And the last page again was controlled by my students. So you can see how a lot of this lesson is about students' participation, students leading, students feeling like the experts, allowing students to take the position of control, of the expert. And that's all been framed because everything they need is in here already to support them. And you can go you can do a lot more with the software in order to do that. But this is a basic, very quickly put together lesson using RM Easiteach Next Generation. If you have any questions, please use the comment bank below and I will endeavour to answer them.